So one of the things I wanted to talk about today was the option Greeks. So we know that our options pricing is primarily made up of direction, time, and volatility. Of course, that equates to our Greeks, delta, theta, and Vega, or the three primary Greeks that factor into the price of our options. So when you're buying or selling an option, how is that price come by? Well, it depends on the strike price you choose and the direction you choose, buying or selling the option, and then how much time is on the trade, and then how volatile that underlying asset is. All of that factors in. That's what gets baked into that options pricing. And if you're new to options trading, it can be confusing, especially when you look at an options chain, what's going on with the Greeks. Now, on an options chain, typically the only Greek I pay attention to is delta. So I have bid-ask spread always on an options chain because that's the most important thing. You need to know the price that these options are trading at. But the other crucial information I typically have on my options chain is delta and then open interest, because I want to see how many contracts are open. This is a Apple options chain, so Apple obviously one of the most highly traded options plays, right? So plenty of open interest in Apple. But if it's a stock or ETF you don't normally trade, typically you'll want to check out the open interest. You want to see thousands of contracts open typically. And Apple, you've got tens of thousands of contracts open on every strike. But as far as the Greeks, I've got delta, because delta is our probability of finishing in the money. It's kind of a proxy for it. So if I sell this 18 delta put, I know it has a potential of finishing in the money about 18% of the time, which means I'm going to lose 18% of the time, right? That's essentially what that means. It means I'm going to win about 82% of the time. If I actually look over here at POP, the probability of profit on the trade, you can see POP is, if I hold all the way to expiration, I will win 83% of the time. So that's really close, right? 82%, 83%. So you can think of delta as a good gauge of the pop on the trade. So that's typically, why I have delta on here. I usually don't have things like Vega or Theta. I really don't care what those numbers are. It's mainly I just want to know how they affect the trade. Now let's talk about if you're looking at an options chain. Delta on puts is always negative, and delta on calls are always positive, because it assumes you're buying these calls and puts, right? So naturally, delta on a call has to be positive, right? So this is, if the underlying stock goes up, this is how much money you're going to make on that option on the next dollar move up, right? So if I buy a call, that's the 49 delta call, and Apple goes up $1, well, this 49 delta call will increase in price 49 cents. Now, if I buy a put, that's the negative 52 delta put, and Apple goes up $1, I'm going to lose 52 cents on this option. So that is delta. It's telling you how much you're going to lose for the dollar move up on the option. Now, again, it assumes you're buying these options, because if I sell this 52 delta put, I'm not going to lose money if the stock goes up. I'm actually going to make money. So really, you can think of these deltas as being flipped if you sell them. So instead of thinking of these as negative deltas, these are really positive deltas, right? So I'm going to make 52 cents on an up move. And inversely on the calls, even though they're positive on the chain, if you sell the call, it's really positional wise, it's a negative delta that you're carrying. So this can be kind of confusing, because any options chain you look at anywhere on the internet, they're always going to have negative deltas on the puts, positive deltas on the call, but that's for the individual options. It's not your positional deltas. Your positional deltas, you go to like the positions tab on TASTYTRADE. Your positional deltas will be, is the trade a bullish trade or a bearish trade? If it's primarily a bullish trade, it's going to have positive deltas. If it's primarily a bearish trade, it's going to have negative deltas. For example, this Oclo earnings trade, this long put butterfly, wants the stock to go down. It's a bearish trade. So it naturally carries negative deltas, or you could call them short deltas. And then I have a put credit spread in Meta, which is naturally a bullish trade. That's why it has positive deltas. So the deltas on the options chain are the individual options deltas, assuming you buy the option. But that's not the positional delta. The positional delta is, all you need to know is, are you bullish or bearish? If you're bullish, your positional deltas are positive. If you're bearish, your positional deltas are negative. Now, when it comes to the other Greeks, I don't typically look at them on the options chain, but if I looked at Theta, and let's go back to Apple because it doesn't have a million strikes like Meta does. Let's go to the 65-day cycle. So now I've got Delta in this column here. Got Theta over here. I don't typically look at Theta on the options chain. All you need to know is that Theta on the options chain is always negative because the passage of time always erodes the options price a little bit, right? Your price goes down, right? The option loses value each day that time passes. So Theta is always a negative number on the options chain. Now, an option losing value is really bad if you're long a put or long a call, right? If you're long an option, that's why these are negative values. But if you're short a put or short a call, the option losing value is a good thing. So even though it is, Theta's always negative, as far as your P&L, it's a positive when you're short an option. So even though Theta is always negative on the options chain, when you go and look at your positional Theta, it's always going to be positive if you're primarily short options. For example, this strangle and hood, I'm carrying positive Theta, right? Each day that passes benefits that position. If I had something that was primarily a long options play, well, like that long put butterfly, I paid a debit for that. It is primarily a long options play, so it's going to have negative Theta. So all you need to know with Theta, as far as your positional Theta, is if you're long an option, or primarily long an options position, as far as you paid a debit for something, you're probably carrying negative Theta. And then if you're short options positions, you're carrying positive Theta. So that's really all you need to know with Theta. I don't need to necessarily know the actual numbers. If I sell a put, I know that's a positive Theta play. I'm making money every day that time passes on this position. If I buy a call, I know that's a negative Theta play. I'm going to lose money every day that time passes as far as some of the time value that comes out of that option. I don't necessarily need to monitor Theta. Same thing with Vega. I go take a look at Vega. Vega positive for both the calls and the puts. Now, what Vega tells you is how much that options price will increase if volatility goes up 1%. So all you need to know really with both long calls and long puts, because you see the numbers are positive for both, is that when volatility goes up 1%, the options price will increase whatever that amount of Vega is. That's all you need to know. And obviously, if you're short the options, then a 1% increase of volatility, increasing the value of these options, is a negative thing for you. It's not what you want. You would prefer volatility to go down. So you're long an option, Vega is positive. You're short an option, Vega is negative. That's all you need to know. And then from there, you almost don't even need, like when I go and put on any kind of options trade, I already know whether it's going to be positive, negative delta, positive or negative Theta, positive or negative Vega. For example, let's just put on some example trades, and you guys can play along in the chat. If I put on, how about we do a put ratio spread, a 2x1 put ratio spread, front ratio spread. Let's start with deltas. That positive or negative deltas. Now remember, with delta, all you need to know is it's a bullish trade, it has positive deltas. If it's a bearish trade, it has negative deltas. Always. All you need to know is direction. So it's got to be positive delta. You already know. And this is one of the things you need to know, especially when you're monitoring your positions, or managing your portfolio, sometimes you want to add positive deltas, or sometimes you want to add negative deltas. All you need to do is go, if I needed positive deltas, go put on some bullish trades. If I need more negative deltas, go put on some bearish trades. That's all you need to know. So delta's easy, right? You know that has to be a positive delta. Now, what about theta? Is this primarily a positive theta trade or a negative theta trade? Well, I've got 2 short puts versus 1 long put. Overall, short options position. Short options positions have positive theta, right? The passage of time is going to help this position, right? If it was the other way around and I had 2 long puts versus 1 short put, it would be primarily a long options position, and then theta would be negative. The passage of time would hurt that position. Now let's talk about volatility. Vega. Is this primarily a positive Vega trade or a negative Vega trade? Well, all you need to know, is it a short options position or a long options position? Well, primarily a short options position, because I've got 2 short options versus 1 long option. So Vega naturally will be negative, right? Because an increase in volatility would hurt this position. If I had 2 long puts versus 1 short put, then it would be a positive Vega position, as an increase in volatility would help that position, because we would be primarily holding long options, which we want the price of those things to increase as volatility increases. So I hope some of this made sense a little bit, especially if you're kind of new to the Greeks. It can be kind of confusing. For me, I'm only ever really concerned about monitoring delta. It's the only Greek I need to know the actual numbers. Everything else, theta and vega, I need to know whether they're positive or negative. That's very important. You need, as soon as you put on the trade, I need to know if I'm carrying positive theta or negative theta on that trade. Positive vega, negative vega on that trade. I don't need to know the numbers. That doesn't matter. I don't monitor that. But it's very important, especially, for example, when you get something like a volatility spike in the market. Well, a volatility spike, what will get hurt badly by a volatility spike? Short options, particularly short naked options. So if you have a portfolio of nothing but naked strangles, and VIX goes from 20 to 50 in a week, your portfolio is going to look really, really bad. You are going to be down potentially tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in a portfolio, depending on your account size. You know, it will look ugly. And that's because you have on nothing but those negative Vega trades, and then you just had the vol spike, right? It's even worse for you because you had nothing but strangles. You're carrying 2 short options on those positions, each of those positions. That's why people get blown up sometimes in a vol spike. It's because they had too many of the same kinds of trades on. And it's kind of like if all you do is, same thing with Delta. All you do is put on bullish trades. All you do is sell puts. Sell puts on everything. And then the market crashes. Well, that's going to hurt, right? You're going to take a massive drawdown. Then you got to also consider that with things like Theta and Vega. If all you're doing is carrying negative Vega and volatility spikes, it's the same thing as if all you were doing was putting on bullish trades and the market crashes. Diversify a little bit with your strategies. And this is why it's a good idea sometimes if you're going to sell puts. You know, I love selling puts, but every now and then, maybe switch it up. Sell a put credit spread instead, because now you're still primarily bullish, but you're not as bullish because you don't have as many deltas on a put credit spread because you're carrying both a short put and a long put. And also, put credit spread doesn't get hurt at all in a volatility spike because you're holding 1 short option and 1 long option. So when vol spikes and it kills that short option, well, it greatly helps the long option. A vol spike, I mean, credit spreads are a non-event in a vol spike. And they're not going to get hurt at all. So again, it's why you want to mix and match some of your strategies. Have some bullish, bearish, and neutral trades as far as Delta. Have some, primarily we want to be positive Theta, but it's not crazy to have some negative Theta trades on occasion. Same thing with Vega. You want to primarily be negative Vega, But sometimes carrying some positive Vega is not a bad idea, or at the very least, having some trades that are kind of Vega neutral, like spreads. Because again, spreads really don't get hurt on those vol spikes.